Hey there, welcome to another mock draft for the 2024 season. Yeah, I'm glad I clicked it right now. There are 7 minutes in the lobby to go, but that evaporated rather quickly, literally 2 seconds after I hit record. So we got a minute here until I pick first overall. We're mocking from the number 1 spot in your draft in 12-team PPR leagues. Got a request on the channel at the DFS build. If I help you out in any way, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. Both those things help me out a lot. I mean, honestly, this is a ton of fun for me. Helps me prepare for my drafts. I enjoy doing it. And if you ever have questions or comments or whatever, hit me up in the comments and we can have combo about fantasy football all day. So at the top spot, I don't have much time here. It comes in 20 seconds, and I only have 30 seconds to make my pick. This is at the FantasyPros mock draft lobby. It's going to be C-Mac. Christian McCaffrey is dealing with a minor injury, but it is not a big deal. They're just letting him rest until week 1. Then he'll be back to it. Obviously, the week 1 matchup against the Jets is not ideal, but overall, he's just been a smash hit. I'm just going to take this, and we can talk about him a little bit, and also other options you can hit around that area. So he had 101 more fantasy points than any other running back last year, and I think he was. Let's see. Overall, he was. Let's see. This is not updating for me. Oh, that's fun. Let's see. It's really not reacting very well. Okay, so he was number 6. Let's see where he was. This is standard. That's why I was like, that does not add up at all. So number 1 by 101 fantasy points over all other running backs. Breece Hall was number 2. And if you look at overall, he was number 3 overall. CD was number 2, and Josh Allen was number 1. So why don't you draft a quarterback, or why don't you draft CD number 1? Well, because there's literally 32 quarterbacks, and a good chunk of them are very good, and a smaller chunk of that group, but still a pretty good group when you're looking at 10 to 12 teams in your fantasy football league, can have a shot at top 5 and maybe even top 1 overall production. Obviously, Josh Allen is the god when it comes to quarterbacks in fantasy football, but it's just a lot easier to replace that stud beastly season at quarterback than it is at running back. And same thing with wide receivers. You can take CD number 1 overall, but right now he's obviously in a holdout with the Dallas Cowboys. And beyond that, there are just a lot of other wide receivers who are capable of putting up monster numbers. Tyreek Hill was number 4 in fantasy points last year, and then Amon-Ra St. Brown also cracked the top 10 overall. So there's just a lot, obviously, and then you have like Jamar Chase, who's impacted by Joe Burrow. You have Justin Jefferson, who missed half the year, but was like a per game monster like usual. And then obviously Puka Nacua broke out. Cooper Kupp was hurt. There's just so many other options at wide receiver that can crush. But running back is very, very thin. You have the top heavy guys like C-Mac, Bijan Robinson, and Breece Hall, and then it starts to get a little bit, murky after that. It's not like you can't trust other guys, you can't take chances on other guys like Saquon Barkley, Travis Etienne. See what other running backs did well last year. Kyron Williams, his per game averages were beastly. 21 points a game was, I think, his only second to C-Mac. Yeah, indeed it was. So he's a monster if he can stay healthy. There are a lot of good running backs, but nobody is as good as Christian McCaffrey. So here's the deal with C-Mac, especially since he's hurt right now. If you have the number 1 overall pick, you're thinking, how do I invest in this pick without taking on crazy risk? I mean, you can't. It is what it is. Christian McCaffrey has had seasons before where he was the consensus number 1 guy, and then he got hurt and missed like most of the year. That might happen, but it probably won't. And he's just, you have to weigh, do I take on the risk of that happening, or do I take on the risk of fading the obviously best option at number 1 overall? In a game of chance like fantasy football, you just have to take the best player, and that is Christian McCaffrey. If you disagree, if you're already seeing the tea leaves for a 28-year-old running back, and you think this latest ailment is going to be a thing that lingers, or you think it's just a sign of things to come, absolutely you can consider a pivot. And if you do, I would suggest, because running back is so top heavy and it gets thin pretty quickly, I would suggest a pivot to Breece Hall first, because I just like his role the most. Caught a ton of receptions last year for the Jets. I think he was only second in receptions to Alvin Kamara, and he was second overall in fantasy points. And this was a year after shredding his knee too. So Breece Hall is a monster. He could be even better with Aaron Rodgers back for the Jets too. So lots to like there. And then Bijan Robinson should have a bigger workload now that Arthur Smith is terrorizing Pittsburgh fans instead of the Atlanta Falcons. So both all three of those guys look really good. It just goes C-Mac, Brees, Bijan for me. Uh, if you want to prioritize and get a wide receiver and get that stud wide receiver, because wide receivers naturally are safer. They can get hurt too, by the way, but they are absolutely safer. I would agree with that. Historically, they have longer shelf lives in the league in general, and just they don't get serious injuries quite as frequently as running backs do. Because they're not running into piles of giant man eaters on a regular basis. So if you want to do that, you can look at CeeDee, Jamar, Tyreek, even Amon-Ra St. Brown. These guys are all in play, but I just think Christian McCaffrey is the best overall pick, and it's really not even that close. All right, so the second part of picking at 1.01 is what the fuck do we do from here? Where do we go after we get if we're in the number one spot? That's the fun and bad thing about picking first in fantasy football. Either you randomize your draft order, and here you are getting the first pick, which is it should be the best player in fantasy football that you can build a team around, or your previous season was ghastly and you earned the right to pick here, and now you can start over with again the best player in fantasy football. Assuming you have C-Mac, you're probably thinking, now where do I go from here? Well, you already have your top running back, and I just tend to value running backs and wide receivers a lot because I think you can get pretty good value at quarterback for sure, and also tight end. So here we are picking for the first time in many, many picks, and we have we could look at running back if we wanted to. I don't really want to do that just yet. I can get another running back if I want to. I'm looking at wide receiver and who offers the most upside of all these guys. It'd be between Waddle and Kupp for me. I'm actually going to take Kupp just because he's actually healthy this year. And the splits in and out between him and Puka Nacua I think they favor Kupp long term here. Obviously, Kupp doesn't have a very long shelf life as far as playing a lot more years in the NFL, but I think as long as he's there, the Rams are kind of going to use him until the wheels fall off. And, we could go back to running back here because we're going to have a bit of a run here and that will hurt. But I think I'm going to go get Jalen Waddle. That way I know for sure I'm going to have two really, really, really good wide receivers up top. And I think there's a decent enough value in the mid-range of running backs, and you're already starting to see it to the point where we can come back and get a couple of decent running backs. I mean, the wide receiver position is also admittedly deep. However, I really, really like the upside of a healthy Waddle because Waddle was a beast. Just the other, how many games did he miss last year? Let me look up Waddle real quick as we're waiting for our turn. Wide receiver 8 in his second season, 117 targets that year. He's very, very, very efficient, very, very explosive. He was only wide receiver 34 last year because he missed 3 games. He was banged up in a bunch of other ones. Still had 1,000 yards, just was a little bit light on the touchdowns with only 4. And by the way, he was wide receiver 13 as a rookie. Obviously, your ceiling is going to be a little bit lower than other people just because Tyreek Hill's presence. But the Dolphins run the ball so well, and they're so explosive and so creative with their schemes that you add scheme to the athletic ability of somebody like Jalen Waddle, and it's good night nurse. So really, really like Waddle. And the funny thing is, going from the 1.01 spot is kind of like the only spot where I really find myself being able to take him. So let's go back and look at other guys that were in that range. I kind of had to go pretty quickly, but I have no reservations about going Kupp and Waddle there. After them, it was Debo, Pittman. I mean, Pittman just feels like such a mid pick. You're dealing with Anthony Richardson, who is an exciting player in isolation because of his rushing ability, but he is not an exciting player as far as correlation. Like, do I feel great about a guy who is not an accurate passer or a consistent player in college throwing passes to my wide receiver 2? No, not at all. So not much interest in Pittman or the Colts wide receivers unless I'm getting value of somebody like Josh Downs way later in the draft because he's banged up. And I do like Debo a little bit, but I prefer Brandon Ayuk, which is weird. People are still assuming Ayuk gets traded. Maybe he does, but if Ayuk does get traded, he's just going to get more volume than he's ever seen, whether it be with the Commanders or the Steelers. If that ends up happening, then yeah, Debo's value would spike. But right now, I mean, Cup is a guy who has been the wide receiver one overall in the entire league, so we know he can be that guy. Puka being there helps and hurts him to a certain degree. I think his overall ceiling technically would come down just because Puka was so damn good as a rookie. And there's going to be weeks where Puka is the guy and Cup is kind of just the decoy-esque kind of player, and that's fine. And same thing with Waddle and Tyreek. But when you're picking from the first spot, you can't get Tyreek, so you just kind of have to just take the next best option in a really good passing offense. And I think we're getting that with Waddle and Cup. All right, as we move on here, what do we do now? Now that we have a really good running back, and now it's my pick with 30 seconds on the clock, and we have two really good wide receivers, I think now everything's pretty open because we're now into the end of round 4, right? So you can go get your second running back. It's probably what I'm going to do here. Stevenson is going to have a big role. James Conner is going to have a big role. They don't feel like sexy plays by any means. You can go over to tight end and get a stud. I think you can wait on tight end even at this spot. So I am actually going to go and get Stevenson to get my second running back in there. I mean, he's gonna catch passes. He's gonna get early down work. He's gonna get red zone work. If they end up starting Drake May as a rookie, and even if it's Jacoby Brissett, I think he's going to get so much work, it's going to work out just fine. We can go back to wide receiver. Who's going to get the volume here? I like all these guys, but it's going to be Malik Neighbors for me. Do I trust Daniel Jones? No, I do not. But Malik Neighbors is a freak. And he's going to get volume. He's already shown it in training camp and preseason, just that he's going to get open a shit ton. So if Daniel Jones can just get out of his own way and just get the ball to this dude, he has Justin Jefferson / Jamar Chase upside. I'm sorry, but quick recap here. Even though we're picking at the number 1 overall pick, we are still able to get a trio of wide receivers that are Jalen Waddle, Cooper Kupp, and Malik Neighbors. This is major volume coming here. I will say Waddle has not experienced the same volume the last 2 years because Tyreek's been in Miami, but he's just hyper efficient, and the way he's being used is allowing him to hit anyways. I would imagine his volume will tick back up a little bit. He missed 3 games last year and he was banged up, and that's a big reason why he only had 104 targets. But he had 117 the year before and finished wide receiver 8 with Tyreek there. So to me, top 10 is where he can get pretty easily. And if he can actually score touchdowns, he should be due for positive touchdown regression after only scoring 4 last year, then he could be an absolute smash. And then obviously Neighbors, it's a risky play in the sense that he's a first-year player, but it's not risky at all when you look at talent and opportunity. And also, are the Giants going to be good? Are they going to be running and being dominant on the run? I don't really think so, which means they'll be playing from behind. They'll be throwing even more than usual. And who do you think they're going to be throwing to? Malik Neighbors. Let's get a drink of water to keep pace here. We got quite a few picks left. Okay, so I'm very much BPA, right? Best player available. I like to wait on quarterback. I like to wait on tight end. When you're picking first overall, you do have to shift your draft strategy slightly. I think I definitely prefer Malik Neighbors over, I was looking at Trey McBride before. I love Trey McBride. And another guy I really like, Dalton Kincaid, he's also gone. That's kind of, if I'm going to pick tight end before where I'm picking now, which would probably be right around round 5, Trey McBride and Dalton Kincaid would be my targets. Trey McBride first. I think in that draft range, Kincaid's probably a little bit more likely to be there for you. And I love them both. I think they're going to be awesome plays this year. So Kincaid to me is the way better value. But if you can get McBride in that same draft range, I would try to do that. So I would now start looking at tight end at this point. Here's my pick is here. Evan Ingram is okay, but I don't expect him to repeat the season he had last year. Kittle is very, very volatile. Kyle Pitts has monstrous upside. Joku had a great season last year. So those guys are definitely in play. You can look over at quarterback. Jaden Daniels is the guy I'll be looking at, but I'm going to see if I can stretch that out and wait a little bit longer. And then we can also go get guys like Javonte, Swift, and such. But I'm going to go grab my tight end here, and that's actually going to be Kyle Pitts. This is the year, right? Maybe not. Who knows? So we have our starting lineup. We don't need to draft just for lineup for sure. We don't need to do that every time, but I certainly don't mind doing that. If we look at our wide receivers, nobody's really calling to me here. I do like Rome there. We can get in on another stud rookie. And I think that is what I'm going to do because I think at this point the running backs kind of all are a blur. They're kind of similar. So we'll kind of let that work itself out for us. So here we are our picks are through round 7. We've got our boy C-Mac. He's the anchor. He should give us 20 fantasy points a game, if not more. And obviously he's got spike weeks coming. We got a decent RB2 in Stevenson. Nothing wrong with Stevenson. If you want to pivot and go with James Conner, DeAndre Swift, these other guys in the same range, that's up to you. I just think Stevenson has kind of displayed that ceiling floor and is younger, and they just signed him. And it's like Antonio Gibson is his only real threat for touches and snaps. Like, I'm not afraid of that at all. And they're either playing with Jacoby Brissett or a rookie, and they have a bunch of young wide receivers or just bad receivers. So they should run, and when they're not running, he should be pretty active as a pass catcher. So Stevenson, I feel, is a pretty damn good value at the end of round 4. I think him and James Conner are very, very similar. I just trust him more because, number one, he's not 90, and then also he doesn't have Trey Benson breathing down his neck, right? So that looks pretty good to me. Waddle and Kupp, again, in that range, there's very, very good options. You can definitely disagree with those picks as far as, maybe you would have wanted a different wide receiver as opposed to those two guys, but they both look great. They have a very strong argument for them, and you could do a lot worse than Waddle and Kupp as your top 2 wide receivers. Maybe you're not super excited about the risk of Pitts and Neighbors, but the upside is glorious. Here's the deal. Kyle Pitts has not had a good quarterback. He has not had a system that has favored him. And in his rookie season, he had over 1,000 yards. I mean, we know what he can do. We know how what his athletic profile looks like. But now he has a quarterback who is good. Granted, Kirk Cousins is coming off of a torn Achilles, but he's a good quarterback who has consistently put up good fantasy numbers. And he's also supported good fantasy numbers for his wide receivers and tight ends. TJ Hawkinson was a boss for him in Minnesota. Okay, so we know Cousins will go to him. And right now it's Kyle Pitts and Drake London for the Falcons as the top 2 passing game weapons. So I think Drake London definitely is the guy between the two as far as ceiling and floor. Like, he feels safer, and he's just going to probably be the number 1 option. But Jonnu Smith is gone. Arthur Smith is gone. Pitts is healthier than he was a year ago. Major quarterback upgrade. I'm sorry. I'm in on Pitts. Finally, I think Pitts is going to smash. All right, so here we go again. Oh, boy, there's a lot to like here at wide receiver. I love Christian Watson. I love Brian Thomas. And I think you could take a shot on guys like Jameson Williams and Keon Coleman for sure. So I'm definitely looking at them. The only question is there a running back here that I have to get now? Yeah, there is. It's going to be Jonathan Brooks. I took him last time when I was picking from the 11th spot, and I'll talk about him more in a second. But first, I got to go get my boy, and that is Christian Watson. Okay, so now that I have these guys, I can talk about them. And then for my next pick, I think it's time to go get my quarterback. And you're asking, did you wait too long? No. Maybe I haven't waited long enough. Quarterback is deep, dude. Okay, so I'm human too. So and I have differing opinions, and I have a lot of guys I like. So how I look at quarterback, I will be a little bit different depending on the draft, depending how it's going. There are some times where I just say, fuck it, I'm taking Josh Allen, because Josh Allen is fun to have. So, okay. You could say the same thing for Mahomes or Hurts too. Boy, oh boy, it's not fun to face those guys. And it sure is good to know that when they go in, you probably have 20 fantasy points and you might get 40. So that is really fun. The only thing is you don't really need that necessarily. And a lot of the guys that you can get later in drafts, they're going to give you the same like mid-range, weeks a lot of the time. And they also can have spike weeks. So like Tua, for instance, was quarterback 9 last year. If we go look at Tua, who is still available and he has a great offense, and he's a good stacking option with our boy Waddle, who I took. If you go and look at his games, he had in the first half of the season, he had 1, 2, 3, 4 games with 22 plus fantasy points. Pretty damn good, if you ask me. And he had a couple down games, a little inconsistency there, but in general, he exhibited a pretty nice ceiling when he was cooking. Okay, so we could go quarterback here for sure, or we could try to wait one more thing or one more batch here and see if there's anybody who really stands out. I don't see anybody yet that I need to go get. No, so I think I'll get my quarterback now. And since I do have Waddle, No, you know what? Go big or go home. I'm going Caleb Williams just because I think he has a higher ceiling than Tua. He brings a little bit more to the game with his legs than Tua does, and more on that in a bit. Let's just see who else am I missing here. Yeah, not Jahan Dotson. No, Dontavious Wicks is very interesting. I think I can wait another round to get him if I want to. Josh Downs is appealing. I think I'll take a shot on Trey Benson. I mean, it's always good to take a shot on these raw, athletic rookies who really just need opportunity to succeed. So Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, I look at it as a bit of a math game. Two very talented running backs. Trey Benson's negative is that he hasn't looked very good in preseason so far, and he's definitely behind James Conner. Okay, so that's the negative. The positive is that he's an athletic beast who, once he kind of figures it out and it clicks in his head, he's going to be a monster. And James Conner is almost 30, so he's inches away from a huge role. For Jonathan Brooks, the negative is he's currently on the PUP list. He tore his ACL last year, and he probably won't be offering you meaningful production until week 5. Okay, so you're not drafting Jonathan Brooks because he's going to help you get off to a 6-0 start. You're drafting Jonathan Brooks because he's going to help you win your fantasy championship. And you're taking a chance on Benson because he could, right? So if you have McCaffrey and Stevenson, most weeks you don't need to worry about Brooks or Benson anyways. I just think these are really nice high upside guys that could provide a boost if things break their way. And it is what it is. If you get to like week 8 and Benson just is not there, you can drop him for the hottest waiver wire ad or whatever. All right, so one pick away here. So this would be a probably good time to get Dontavious Wicks if he's still there, and he is. You can also look at a high upside guys like Jalen Polk, Xavier Legette, who I really like if he can win the starting job. He's been nicked up like all summer though, but he looks like a beast. Definitely don't want the geriatric Thielen. So I'm going to go Wicks just because, I mean, somebody in this Packers offense is going to wreck. If Christian Watson hits, Wicks probably won't. More on that in a second. Let's go back and get who we want here. Marshawn Lloyd looks like a pretty advantageous play. Nobody here really checks out. Bucky Irving could steal snap. Fucking that dude, Dennis Allen hates Kendra Miller. So I'm going to draft Marshawn Lloyd just because there's a chance that Josh Jacobs isn't that dude. He was not very good last year. Packers paid him a lot of money, so I'd imagine they are going to feed him the rock. But there's a chance that it just doesn't work out. So, probably one or two of these rookie running backs I take won't pan out. But one of them, in my opinion, for sure will. So it's a math game. You're taking 3 shots on these rookie running backs, and I'm pretty darn confident that one of them will smash, which means you have a weekly flex play at worst, and a guy who could push Stevenson for that RB2 slot at best. And just in general, some high upside depth pieces off the bench here. I do not normally get a backup for my quarterback or tight end. If you're drafting the quarterback and tight end to be your starter, and then these fringe dudes who, like if Marshawn Lloyd does nothing all year, you can just drop him to get a bench quarterback for the week Caleb Williams is on a bye, or the week Kyle Pitts is on a bye, and so forth. I do suggest that if you're playing a rookie or something that hasn't really been hitting, like Kyle Pitts, that could make you go get a second tight end or quarterback to feel a little bit safer about your roster. But if they don't hit, you're kind of screwed anyways. It's just the way it is. All right, so for defense, definitely some options here. I think the Eagles are probably the way I'd go, just because they are an aggressive unit with a lot of upside. They have the ability to get a lot of sacks and turnovers. And I'm gonna stick with, oh man, all these kickers are pretty solid. I think I'm gonna go with my boy. Oh man, Evan McPherson, good. I like all these kickers. To be honest, this is a nice little spot to get your kickers. I think I'll just get Jake Moody with 49ers offense. Hard to go against the 49ers offense. Pretty stable, high upside, a lot of opportunities for Jake Moody. Solid young kicker too. We'll see in a second what FantasyPros system gives our mock draft score. But honestly, it's a strong lineup from the first overall spot. Obviously, C-Mac is a great way to start. The whole starting lineup is filled with rock-solid options with a lot of upside. I think you do need to take risks every time you draft. I think if you only draft quote unquote safe players, you're going to run into a lot of situations where you're just getting like a guy with a high floor and that's it, or you're basing everything off of past production only. We need to look at opportunity. We need to look at athletic profile. We need to look at what they're doing in the respective system. I mean, we smashed here, A minus score, and that doesn't shock me, to be honest. I mean, obviously, getting Christian McCaffrey, getting the best overall fantasy player is going to boost you quite a bit. But truth be told, you can mess up a draft from the first overall spot because you don't get to pick again for like 23 picks. The nice thing is you get to pick back to back. So if you're looking and you're hunting your guys and you have a strategy in mind going in, I think you can craft a really nice lineup. So I think as far as like, did I make any mistakes on the fly? I think if I could go back in this specific mock, I might have prioritized getting Trey McBride in the previous round over Kyle Pitts, just because I like him a good amount more. I think he's a lot safer, but I don't mind it because it's a round later to get Pitts. And I was able to get Malik Neighbors, who I just think is going to give you a bigger ceiling than Trey McBride will. And then you still get a high upside guy with Pitts. Anyways, this helps you have an idea of kind of the ebbs and flow of the position of 1.1 overall, and just shows you that you absolutely can build a really good competitive lineup and one that is rated out pretty well. Hopefully this helped you out. If it did, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. I do videos like this as I can over the course of summer. I have mocked from the 12th and the 11th pick, and here's the first pick. And if you leave some comments and special request it, I'll do some more of these. Also have a couple profiles out there for Chase Brown, Dalton Kincaid, Zamir White, and also looked at some ADP stuff. But honestly, this is mostly a DFS channel, so you can tune in here on a regular basis for MLB DFS, NBA, and NFL DFS. All right, thanks for tuning in, and good luck with your draft this year.